Hello and welcome to the next race recap. We had an interesting race out in Japan as both Alpines started within the top 10 for the first time of the season, with Gasly jumping up to third for the first part of the race and Johnson dropping back a few positions.
The first lap saw numerous position changes, with the S's in Sector 1 significantly affecting the lap times of several drivers during the initial stint. Several laps into the race, there was an intense battle for position between Piastri, Johnson and Hamilton as the first round of pit stops approached.
That fight continued for quite some time through turn 1 after a close call between Johnson and Hamilton, but no severe damage was caused. We also checked in with some of the teams throughout the race to get some feedback on their progress so far this season. Haas looking forward to some upgrades come Miami, and Mercedes looking strong throughout the start of the season as they hope to continue that progress throughout the season in order to put up a championship fight against Red Bull.
A lot of movement and planning going on behind the scenes when we were in Japan, and that will continue as we head into the first sprint race weekend this season as we return to China.
Here's something we haven't said for a little while. Welcome along to qualifying in China. After a few years' absence from the calendar, it is great to be back here. But just who is going to put their car on pole?
All right, first sprint race of the season, and I am sorry, this race was supposed to go up on the 5th, on that, and I've been feeling under the weather, so if you guys can tell in my voice, I'm a little raspy, dealing with a sore throat as we're going through sprint qualifying, enough to get into Q2 for that first run, and in DRS after the final corner. That's good enough to get into Q3, the provisional pole, but we're like 4th or 5th after that. But final corner for the sprint race, currently P8, and that's not going to be good enough, so we're going to be starting in P10 for the sprint race.
So it's all about speed in today's sprint. Not very many laps and no chance to get ahead on strategy. Who here today has the raw skill to take them to the top? We're here in the Yangtze River Delta today, home of the 16 corners that make up the Shanghai International Circuit. 54% of this 3.3-mile lap is taken at full throttle, and we'll be getting up to speeds of around 200 miles per hour with DRS assistance down the back straight before the cars break into the tight hairpin at turn 14. Let's run you through the driver grid order for today's exciting sprint. Max Verstappen put in a fantastic lap yesterday, and he'll start from pole position. And Lando Norris lines up alongside. Looking down the rest of the grid, we have Leclerc, Hamilton, Oscar Piastri, Perez, Stroll, Fernando Alonso, Gasly, Johnson, Tsunoda, Sainz, Ricciardo, Magnussen, Albon, Bottas, Joe, Hulkenberg, Sargent, and George Russell ends our grid lineup. And with preparations almost complete, let's head trackside for today's sprint. And alongside me, a man, well, what more can I say? But he's a legend, Anthony Davidson. Well, they say that a change is as good as a rest, and whilst there's not much rest on show in the sprint format today, there's definitely a change to what we're usually seeing on the track. I know what we've got to do before the start of today's race, but what about our driver? What do the final hours look like for them?
Well, for them, you've got your pre-race rituals that you go through. You see different drivers that, some have got their headphones on, they're listening to the music. Some drivers really absorb the energy from the crowd and they're there waving to them. Other drivers, they go within themselves. They chat to their engineers, absorbing that information, that vital information that you need to carry you through the race. And, those pre-race rituals are essential to making things systematic. We do a lot of Grand Prix in a season, and the more systematic you can be, the easier you are within that environment.
All right, both cars starting in the top 10. Just be careful with Gasly next to you through turn 1. The sprint race should be straightforward, so keep the car together, and we should finish within the points.
The formation lap gets underway ahead of today's sprint. It's going to be interesting to see who gets pole position. We're almost ready to start the sprint as the cars take their positions on the grid, with the drivers and teams making their final preparations.
All right, coming through the final corner, side by side with our teammate Pierre Gasly, who's starting in P9. And best start for both of us together. First time we get into Q3 and start in the top 10 for the season. So far, it's only been one of us at each race. But I'm going to see what we can do and see if we can beat Gasly in a position to get into the points. So, our 5 red lights are coming on. Russell back in P20 for an unfortunate qualifying as we are off. Hamilton there fighting Leclerc for P3. Leclerc getting ahead of Norris actually as Verstappen is leading this race. 2 McLarens still fighting Hamilton and Leclerc. We're going to be fighting both of the RB cars, the V-Carbs. And almost coming in contact there with Daniel Ricciardo, who's on the left. We're behind Yuki Tsunoda there. And we settle in for P12 as of right now. They're both side by side, and I believe that's both Aston Martins ahead side by side as well. Yeah, you can see them on the bottom of the screen now as we're still fighting with Ricciardo. Or Tsunoda and Ricciardo are still fighting. As we're coming through Sector 2 now, I believe it is. As we're just waiting to see what we can do against the V-Carbs. So we're waiting for them to make a mistake, because them being side by side, you can see the gap between Tsunoda and Gasly already is over a second and a half now, as we're coming up through the start of Sector 3. Almost coming 3 wide if we can get enough power down. But this long right-hander to the last, the back straight, really starting to lose a little bit of time there, but we are in the tow. No DRS till the next lap. As we're coming down, you see Verstappen P1, Leclerc P2, Norris, Piastri, Hamilton, Perez, Alonso, Stroll. As you can see, we're making a move on the inside of both V-Carbs. We're going somewhat 3 wide. And Tsunoda backs out first and tries to make a move on the inside of that corner against Ricciardo. We're still able to fend them off, as we are already through the first lap here of 10 for the sprint race. And this ride's going to continue, as you can see a lot of the cars so far in this race are pretty grouped up together. You see both McLarens, both Aston Martins, myself and Gasly, Tsunoda, Ricciardo, both Pick Salvers running in similar positions. And Tsunoda has DRS here on the back straight, and he's going to be making a move. You can see him on the right there in the mirror. And we're not really going to be able to do much other than push him off the line to the inside and see if we can hold on to this position as we give him some room. It's not going to be quite enough. Tsunoda up in the P10, and Lance Stroll, the last person to hold on to a position for points in the top 8 for the sprint races here in F1. As we're still trying to fight against Tsunoda, Ricciardo is over a second back behind as we try to make a move here on the inside of Tsunoda, coming over the curb and then forcing Gasly to the outside, which allows us to hold on to P10. And yeah, we're feeling pretty confident coming through, and we're looking at defending against Tsunoda for pretty much the rest of the race for P10 as we try to catch up to our teammate Gasly. 2.5 seconds is the gap as we go to our commentators for today's race.
Well, Martin, it's the first sprint race weekend of the season, and we've already seen some impressive results from the sprint qualifying. Even though we're early in the race, I'm sure there are plenty more surprises in store for us.
This weekend certainly brought a surprise as both Alpine cars qualified in the top 10 for the first time this season. Until now, it had only been one or the other making it in, despite some early season penalties affecting the starting grid order. V-Carb remains on course for favourable starting positions as they have qualified just outside the top 10. It will be interesting to observe how they compare as the season progresses.
Most teams have positioned their drivers on comparable margins regarding setups for today's race. This raises the question of whether teams have favoured lower downforce setups for the sprint, given the FIA's introduction of separate qualifying sessions for sprint weekends. This change allows teams to adjust their setups between the sprint and feature races, potentially leading to improved outcomes by the end of the feature race. One might assume that sprints provide drivers with an opportunity to demonstrate their speed, offering a more intricate challenge than qualifying, yet considerations like fuel and tyre management remain crucial. Ted, could you elaborate on the ways in which sprints influence the season?
Well, Crofty, sprint races are that extra bit of push that the teams get for the championship. Some teams may test parts that would be required specifically for sprints, or they could be still trying to finalise their setups for the Sunday race. On the championship side of things, it allows teams another opportunity at points like F2 has with their pole sitter at the end of qualifying getting to points. This allows drivers to either increase their lead in the championship from other teams or drivers, or crucially close that gap between themselves and the team ahead of them. And with the battle between Red Bull, McLaren and Ferrari this early in the season, I am sure tomorrow's result will be somewhat different than today, but we will have to wait and see.
Thank you for that insight, Ted. It's really surprising what the teams can do with regulations that are ever so changing. But we still have plenty of sprint race to go here today, as we're about halfway through the season's first sprint race. Let's get back to the action and be sure to stay tuned for the feature race tomorrow.
And you can see coming on to lap 5, we're already 2 seconds back behind Gasly. Tsunoda's 1.2. And this race is basically pretty much going to be it. Not really much position changes. We see Zhou and Bottas fighting for position, but that's not really going to do much because they are outside of the points. And by lap 9, Carlos Sainz has caught up to us. 3/10 is the gap as we're coming through the end of the max straight. Or not. No, we're in sector 1. As I said earlier, we are under the weather, so trying to remember where we're at on the track as we transition from lap to lap. We're fighting against Sainz here like we did at the beginning of the race. And, well, not really. That was the V-Carbs we were fighting against at the beginning of the race. So, Sainz and Verstappen getting a DNF there through the start of Sector 2, or just at the end of Sector 1. And that's going to hurt them for the main race as we're able to catch up to Gasly, our teammate, as we're bumped up to P9. Gasly in position to score his first point of the season, as we've been scoring points in 3 of the 4 last races, as we are looking to try and catch up to Gasly, but we are out of the distance, out of the range to catch up to him. So Sainz makes a move for P9, and we're side by side. We both get DRS, dumping DRS, and it's gonna be a battle down to the final corner. This is the battle that I was talking about. Just hadn't come up yet as we're coming through the final few corners, and we're gonna push Sainz out of the way, coming through the final corner, starting the final lap. And it's still going to be a challenge between myself and Sainz. He's going to be coming on the outside through the main straight, and we're not going to be looking at a move quite yet here. On the insider, though, we're going to a little bit of contact as we did with Tsunoda earlier. Sainz is not going to be happy about that. He's going to switch back to the inside there. And coming through Sector 2, side by side, you can see him in the mirror dropping back. And we have the final straight to defend against him for the last time for this sprint race. The first sprint race of the season is going to go to, I believe, I'm not quite sure, I don't remember, we'll see here in a moment. But Leclerc makes a move up the inside and covers us off for P9. That's going to be a P10 finish. Gasly up ahead in P8 for the first sprint of the season, and that's going to be the end of our race.
here's something we haven't said for a little while. Welcome along to qualifying in China. After a few years' absence from the calendar, it is great to be back here. But just who is going to put their car on pole?
Alright, so here we are for feature race qualifying. That's intermediate weather here for the first qualifying session. And that's going to be a decent time. P2, provisional P2, 3/10 off of Alonso. So we're running pretty confident on these inters. It's going to be good enough to get us into Q2. And Q2 is going to be a little bit worse weather. As you can see, we're taking it quite easily. Trying to put the power down. You can see the tires, the wet tires. We did not like the wet tires. It's good enough for us to get into the top 10. Not quite what we wanted. A little bit better of a result. The weather has calmed down a bit, and about a second improvement from that wet weather from the start of qualifying. That's going to be good enough for us to get in the top 10 for the start of this race in P8.
It's time again then for Formula One in Shanghai. Northwest of the thriving city of over 24 million people is a circuit that first featured in the championship calendar back in 2004. It played host to Formula One's 1000th Grand Prix back in 2019. Shanghai International Circuit then is a 16-corner high-speed thrill ride. The long and ever-tightening right-hander at turns 1 and 2 tests the driver's patience. The flats open to the elements location test their skill in a crosswind. 2 DRS zones will assist passing, and they're available into turn 1 and down the kilometre-long back straight into turn 14. It's time to take a look at our starting grid for today's race. Lando Norris put in a fantastic lap yesterday, and he'll start from pole position. And Lewis Hamilton completes the front row. Moving on to the rest of the grid, we have Leclerc, Stroll, Oscar Piastri, Fernando Alonso, Johnson, Ricciardo, Sainz, Perez, Tsunoda, Gasly, Magnussen, Albon, Russell, Joe, Hulkenberg, Bottas, Sargent, and Max Verstappen completes the grid. Now it's almost time for lights out, so let's go down to the track. Well, it's been a long time since I last worked with you. Good to see you again today, Anthony Davidson. Now, we had great fun watching them win last time out. What a great victory it was. But can they carry that into today's race?
It's the important one, isn't it, Crofty? You've done it once, can you do it again? But, you know, if you start believing in yourself and the confidence starts to build, that inner confidence is what you need. And you can carry that through to future races, including this one, and you set that ball rolling. That's the critical thing that they're looking for here. And I believe if you've got that first race win or a win at any stage, it can start to roll with you in a good way.
Impressive fight there in quali in the rain. We knew what to expect with the rain, even though we prepped the setup for a dry race. Let's get out there and get some more points today.
Here we go then. The formation lap gets underway and the excitement here is building as we near ever closer to the start of the race. Which team will come out on top? Who's got their strategies right for today's race? Well, we'll soon find out. So as all the cars reform the grid, the drivers will be hoping to get a strong start. They'll want to earn some valuable points from today's race, with final communications being done with their race engineers, ensuring the planned strategies are all in place.
All right, here we are crossing the start and finish line for the end of the race, starting up next to the Aston Martin. And behind the McLaren, that's a V-carb. I believe that's Ricardo. We'll see here in a second. From a very good qualifying for wet weather qualifying. We haven't really touched the weather at this point in the season. 5 red lights are off, and that's going to be Alonso off to our right. Stroll up ahead. and they're all trying to cover each other off. So we're going to be coming up behind Piastri, and momentarily there was a 3-wide moment there behind us. Gasly, Perez, and Sainz as we're looking to try to make a move on the inside corner. Piastri and Alonso nowhere to go, as Carlos Sainz is still going to be putting pressure on us, as we had a lot of competition with him yesterday in the sprint race. Gasly dropping down to P10, Hulkenberg dropping down to P19, as we saw a surprising moment. First happened with the DNF yesterday in the sprint race, starting from the back of the grid, more than likely with new components on the car for the first few races, the next few races. So, as the fight between myself and Sainz continues, Gasly is putting up pressure against Sergio Perez for P9, as we have Leclerc, no, that's Hamilton and Norris in the front fighting for P2, as we're slotting in behind some of the other drivers. And this final few corners, this back straight, gonna be deciding the order for the first lap, unless somebody can make a move on the final corner. But that's Carlos Sainz trying to make a move, as we're watching Hamilton and Norris fight for position as well. It's Stroll trying to go against Piastri. A lot of fighting, a lot of side-by-sides here as we're coming through the corner on the outside. And we just can't get enough of Carlos Sainz as we're filing in ahead of him, holding on that outside line, carrying a lot more speed. And I'm kind of happy that we didn't have any rain during the race. I'm not looking forward to the possibility of rain in Monaco if that happens. But we'll have to wait and see. A little bit of contact between myself and Sainz here on the next lap, coming through the end of Sector 1, start of Sector 2. Perez behind it now as we drop back. And we're going to use the DRS here on the back straight, see if we can make a move on Sainz. Alonso and Stroll, P5 and P6 for a decent points finish, but it's still the start of the race. And we're already starting to lose ground. This long right-hander, like I said, in the sprint race, we're losing a lot of time. We tried to prefer our setup towards the downforce. We raise front wing a little bit to make those corners. We're sacrificing a little bit of the top speed down these straights. You can see our time. Next little bit of action was the start of 7. Sainz is still holding on ahead of us. Perez is closing in behind us now, just over half a second, 6/10 there. We're trying to make a move on the outside. We make a move on Sainz, possibility of making a move on Stroll. The two Aston Martins still holding on strong. I believe they're both on the same compound of hard tires, which a lot of the drivers, myself and Sainz, are fighting each other with medium tires, as he's trying to make a move on the outside there. 2 wide coming through this long right-hander before the S's here in Sector 2, as we're still holding on to a decent position and a decent pace. It's just a matter of what we can do with our pit stop, as we're trying to close in on Stroll as much as possible, because I know that long right-hander before the back straight, we're going to lose quite a bit of time. I believe it's a little bit of 3/10 or so as we slide there, coming into this final corner. And yeah, so 7/10 back behind Stroll. Stroll's just under a second behind his teammate. We are going to get DRS though, but that's not quite what we want. It's not going to be enough. You can see he's pulling away. And then Sainz and Perez are going to be behind me. You see Sainz with DRS, myself, and then Sergio Perez is going to be trying to make a move on us. He's 3/10 back though. Not quite an opportunity yet for him. He's going to try to make one later on. Sainz and I are coming through that final corner again. For the second to last corner, side by side, he's committed through that final corner. We give him some space so he doesn't go off track, so we don't get a warning for pushing him off track. This fight's going to continue. Sainz is actually ahead on lap 9 as we're trying to fend off Perez. So Sainz made a move on the back straight. Or, no, actually Sector 2. As Perez is trying to make a move on the inside down the start-finish straight, and he does. And the fight's going to transition between me and Perez now, with Gasly behind. So we have some pressure from our teammate. We're going to close the door on the inside there with Perez, and hopefully get a better outing through that left-hander, but that's just not going to be enough. The medium tires now seeming to fall off. These hard tires are performing a lot better, but Sainz is still in the toe of Stroll in the Aston Martin to take care of those tires to the pit stop, which we're going to be coming up on here pretty soon. Gasly, our teammate behind. No team order to move out of the way for Gasly this time around. We have a slip there on the double left-hander, and we're losing ground against Sergio Perez. It's going to be 8/10. We're going to lose time through this long right-hander, and I don't believe we have this. No, we do not. Gasly's going to make the move on the inside. We're going to give it to him. Ricardo is close behind this time to look and see what they can do. And we're going to go ahead and give Gasly that opening, but we're just going to come into the pits anyways. It's lap 13. We come into the pits. We're going to be one of the first few to come in off the mediums. You can see Leclerc coming in. Myself, Hamilton, I believe Magnussen, Sonoda, Albon. Just a handful of us. I believe 6 of us, 5, 6. You can see Magnussen there coming in ahead, and we have an okay launch. A little bit too much power there, but luckily we were able to let it die down before we got released. And P17 coming up through our first pit stop. It's going to be a one-stop race here, so we're halfway through this race. Onto a hard compound tires to run to the end. It's just a matter if we can take care of these tires to the end of the race with the known knowledge that we're losing speed down these straights. Let's see Ricardo, Sargent, and several other drivers, Ricardo, Russell, and then down the pit straight. As we're up into P13 after the second iteration pit stop, we still have, I believe, 2 more to go. P13, 2.4 is the gap between myself and Magnussen. Verstappen, Bottas, Gasly in the pits. They're looking to come out of the pits. I don't know who it is as we pass them. I believe it's Alonso ahead of us. Yes, it is. We're going to be back up into P10 for the 3rd iteration of pit stops. And we're looking at the top 4 or 5. Gasly, Stroll, Perez, Leclerc, Hamilton. Zhou has yet to pit. I believe Piastri is yet to pit along with Stroll. But lap 17, we have Stroll close behind after a pit stop, making a move. That's going to be Perez as well, making a move here. So we're going to be caught in the middle. Perez there on the outside. We bump him a little bit of a scratch on the side pod, and we lose out on 2 positions. We were in P7 at the time, but that's going to be a loss of 2 positions. That's not going to be happy for us. Gasly, a few laps ago, had to retire the car for an engine failure. We didn't really get much information other than that from our team, but we're currently sitting in P9, and as you guys can see, Verstappen, P14 from the back of the grid start, and Ricardo, Magnussen behind us as Stroll and Perez are fighting, so go to the commentators.
One might not expect so many battles in the initial sprint weekend so early in the season. Leclerc broke away from the pack early, leaving Hamilton and Norris to duel it out, while further back Sainz and Johnson were locked in a tussle before Perez managed to gain a position on Johnson.
It's important to note that Sainz and Johnson began the race on medium tyres, which meant their early battle likely compromised their ability to keep pace with the Aston Martins. Moreover, Paris's timely overtake just before the pit stops was pivotal, placing the 3 drivers back into the same dilemma as before, albeit on different tyre compounds for the remainder of the race. This also applies to the majority of the grid. They are spaced out sufficiently to avoid constant concern, yet they still engage in intermittent battles with the cars around them, such as McLaren's Piastri against Hamilton, or Alonso versus Sainz not too far behind.
We've been closely monitoring the battles, with Leclerc leading the race 1.5 seconds ahead of Lando Norris. Johnson appears to be losing pace behind Stroll's Aston Martin, who is attempting to overtake Perez. There's Verstappen, having taken a grid penalty for engine components, has made his way back up to 14th and is currently clocking very impressive laps. Bruno Famin is on standby to explain Gasly's earlier retirement from the race. How has the race been for Gasly before having to retire the car?
It's just like any other race weekend. The team is doing their utmost to ensure the cars perform optimally. However, unpredictability is part of the sport, and when we do have the data, we advise the driver on the safest option. This time, it meant having Gasly retire the car. It's unfortunate that our drivers have had to retire their cars more frequently than expected this early in the season. However, the team is diligently working to ensure that we don't encounter the same issues later in the season.
Bruno, it's always a pleasure to hear from you. Now, as we turn to Ted Kravitz in the pits, let's explore how the use of engine components impacts teams throughout the season.
We've witnessed numerous car issues and retirements in the first 4 races, yet there have been only a handful of grid penalties. This is the tough aspect of component replacement. A prime example is Verstappen incurring a penalty and starting from the back of the grid due to his retirement from the sprint race. Teams are allowed to change parts freely, but once the car exits the pit box for qualifying, any further changes result in penalties. Verstappen's team installed multiple new parts, relegating him to the back of the grid. Consequently, swapping out more parts early in the season can lead to grid penalties later on when drivers are vying for crucial championship points.
Well, that's a lot of information we will touch up on in Miami with plenty more racing today. Let's get back to the race.
All right, so we're still sitting in P9, lap 20 of 28. Stroll 2.7 seconds ahead. Magnussen 3.2 ahead, or 3.2 behind. So we just basically have to take care of these tires. But on lap 26, 8.6 is the gap between us and Stroll. And as you can see, it's Verstappen making a move on the inside with DRS and tow. And there's not much we can do about it. We just have to hold on against Verstappen to the end of the race and see where we can finish. We are within the points though, so that's very promising. It's just a matter if we can get ahead of Verstappen on a final lap here in two laps to go as we start lap 27. And it's going to come down to that. We went back and forth on lap 27. Lap 28 now, we're about 7/10 back from Verstappen. We have DRS, we're dumping the battery, we're going to make a move. We're trying to move Verstappen to the inside, and not quite. So we make the move to the inside. We go wide and late on our braking point. And there he is on the inside. We put the power down, keep our car in a straight line as much as possible, and we push Verstappen wide through the final corner to hold on to P9 for 2 points in today's race.
And it's Monaco go for Charles Leclerc as he takes the checkered flag and wins. And here we are, a team that is no stranger to the podium, taking their place on top once again. A sublime race today, and a stunning win for Ferrari. After an event like that, who knows what the sport has in store for us next time out? Be sure to join us once again as we continue to bring you all the excitement of Formula One.